Tēnā koutou katoa and welcome to the NZILA Tuapita Ora Streetscapes webinar. For those who don't know me, I'm Angela Hunter, the COO for NZILA. Today we're delighted to have Bruno Marques, the IFLA President and Associate Dean for Academic Development and Senior Lecturer in Landscape Architecture at Victoria University, and Carey Duncan, Landscape Architect, joining us from Paris on holiday, I believe. Before we begin, I would like to thank our webinar sponsor, Streetscapes, who are supporting the series. This is a second in this year's series, and we have 3 more scheduled in the coming months. In a moment, I'll share with you a short video on Streetscapes, highlighting their products and services. So please go and check out the Streetscapes website or contact Paul and the team to chat over some ideas for your next street furniture project. We'll just play the video now as an introduction. It will play for about 2 minutes, so thanks.
Streetscape is New Zealand's leading manufacturer of quality street furniture, lighting poles, shelters, and sculptures that breathe life into our open space environments. Collaborating with landscape architects and designers to share our manufacturing expertise and experience, we create solutions to meet your design brief, your budget, and your project delivery deadline. At Streetscape, we have a great range of off-the-shelf furniture. Together, we can modify and customize our existing ranges to suit, or we can provide the design support to manufacture fully bespoke furniture for your project. With all furniture proudly manufactured in New Zealand from locally and ethically sourced materials, and with over 100 years of combined experience, you can be sure of the craftsmanship. Quality products made to withstand our unique environmental conditions while meeting all local health and safety standards. Local doesn't just mean local knowledge and local jobs. It also means reduced lead times and a local team who manage every step of the way with you to see the project from your concept through to final delivery. Aotearoa, New Zealand, these are our places, our communities, our environments, and we want you to enjoy them the way you imagine them. That's why we go that extra mile every time. Streetscape, turning your imagination into reality. Streetscape, in conjunction with the NZILA, are proud to sponsor the Streetscape Speaker Series.
So again, thank you Streetscapes for supporting the series. I will now hand over to Bruno to introduce himself and our guest speaker, Carey Duncan. Thanks, Bruno.
Thanks, Ange. Noho mai, here mai, na mihi nui kia koutou katoa, kia ora I te whanau. Bruno toko ingoa. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. It's my pleasure to join you this morning. And it's also my pleasure to welcome you to today's speaker, Carey Duncan. I had the pleasure of knowing Carey for probably almost 20 years. So Carey is South African, but has lived and worked as a landscape architect in Morocco for the past 30 plus years. She's also founding member of the Moroccan National Association, AAPM, and also a member of ILASA in South Africa, and international member of ASLA in the United States. Her portfolio, which includes projects on 3 continents, illustrates a wide variety of typologies and challenges, and this diversity also offers an opportunity and advantages of working and developing projects as landscape architects around the world in dealing with extreme conditions. So Carey is also the immediate past president of IFLA Africa, our region for IFLA, and continues to serve on its executive committee as an ex officio member. She's also been part in many of the IFLA working groups and enjoys the stimulation of collaboration across continents. I also had the pleasure last year to award Carey with the NZILA President's Award for her outstanding contributions to the profession across the African continent. So in today's webinar, Carey will be discussing regional identity, beauty, and the ethics of planting in arid regions. Just reminding everyone that we will have a Q&A session at the end of Carey's presentation. So please put any questions you have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Now, over to you, Carey.
Thanks very much, Bruno, and thank you to the New Zealand Association of Landscape Architects for this invitation. I think I should say kia ora, is that correct? Or bonjour, salam alaikum, hello, good morning. And for me, it's 10 p.m. at night. Let me try and share my presentation quickly. Okay, can you see it okay?
Yeah, thumbs up.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so as Bruno said, I'm going to be talking about regional identity, beauty, and the ethics of planting in arid regions, or things that get my goat. So thank you for letting me have a little rant this evening or this morning. I have lived in Rabat for more than 30 years now, and I really, really love it. In the last 10 years, it has become even more beautiful, livable, and walkable if you're quite good at dodging cars at street crossings. The Casbah des Oudaya, where the city began, is still active and vibrant and a striking sentinel that guards the mouth of the Beauregreg River. In the old Casbah, there are some beautiful gardens, which I was invited to restore, a commission that I declined because it included demolishing and rebuilding the original pathways because they didn't cross at perfect right angles, a scar that even I, with my experienced eye, had never even noticed. These gardens are an example of traditional Andalusian garden design. They offer shade and coolness when it gets really hot. There's also some amazing ancient architecture going back to the 12th century with newer additions that are still centuries old. The handiwork illustrated in the slide on the right is still done today. They're hand-carved ceramic tiles, which are cut, each piece is cut individually. And there's still craftsmanship that is carried out today. That and carved cedar wood or carved plaster or engraved brass, ancient crafts that are still happening. There are some entirely mineral spaces which are amazing to be in, a real sense of genius loci. This minaret is one of 3 identical ones in Marrakesh, called the Koutoubia, and in Seville in Spain, which is now a clock tower of the cathedral. Tour Hassan, or the Hassan Tower, lost its top third in the Lisbon earthquake of 1755. Whereas the OMS recommends 10 square meters of green space per habitant, Rabat offers at least 20 and has plans to increase this to 30 in the future. This generous quota is made possible thanks to the early plans of the French protectorate of the early 20th century. The city laid out by Henri Prost was influenced by Jean-Claude Nicolas Forestier, French landscape architect. The plan on the left shows the existing town in 1913, which was essentially the old Medina, which you can see in the dark, let me go back again, in the sort of dark square bit over here. And the plan on the right shows a network of open spaces of the Prost plan of Rabat, which, as you can see, anticipated a very large expansion of the city. Forestier insisted on conservation of existing gardens, the creation of new open spaces, the creation before the city develops of land designated for public gardens, avenues and pedestrian paths, and the connection of different neighborhoods by a hierarchy of streets, all suitably planted. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the aerial photograph, which shows some of these initial green spaces, which are still preserved in the city center. as well as to the south, the Green Belt, which was created by or declared by King Hassan II in the early 1970s. It's about 150 hectares of green space, which has stopped Rabat joining up completely with the city to the south. Rabat was declared a World Heritage Site in 2012. The inscription is for the new town designed by Henry Prost and Jean-Claude Nicolas Forestier and built between 1912 and the 1930s, including some of the older historic monuments. The new town is acknowledged as one of the largest and most ambitious projects built in Africa in the 20th century, and also probably the most complete. With all this beauty and international recognition, what could possibly be getting my goat then? There are some new monuments in Rabat as well. I actually like them. One is the Zaha Hadid Theatre on the banks of the Borough River, which still isn't open in spite of having been completed at least 2 years ago. And the other, which you see on the right of the screen, is the Mohammed VI Tower, which is the second tallest building in Africa. It was recently dethroned by a building in Egypt, I believe. Looking carefully at the aerial photograph, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that these two iconic buildings are actually situated in a riverbed. I'm ensured that it's all safe and well planned because the river has been dammed upstream, so the flow of water is controlled. Remember what happened in Libya not so long ago when a human-made dam broke. It's not these new icons of modern Rabat that gets to me, nor all that much that they sit in a floodplain, but it's the hectares and hectares of green lawn which have to be irrigated in the climate that we live in. And in this particular case as well, the trees get to me a little bit because they're in a riverbed. If they'd been planted on the edges, I might be able to understand, but it seems counterintuitive, both in terms of landscape patterns and in terms of flood protection. It seems that we're doing things backwards over here. Green lawn and some trees planted in a grid with no apparent form or composition alongside the theatre. Can you call this a garden? Can you call this nature? I started off by saying that Rabat is beautiful. Now I'm asking myself, is Rabat beautiful? Here, green lawns, not a single tree. Rabat is being greened by the indiscriminate planting of green lawn everywhere, even where other things existed before, like indigenous doom palms or Camerops humilis. And you can see the burnt out ground here in the foreground of the slide, which is taken off Google Maps. Even on road verges, where no one is going to sit or even walk, it's clean, it's green, but is it sustainable? Is it beautiful? I spend my life on my walk to work every morning, nearly every morning, looking for the intruder, looking for the mushroom in the grass, or the dandelion in the lawn, the moss on stone walls, the miniature moss forest on top of walls, or signs of past life, leaves and papery bracts fallen from plants inside private villas onto the public domain. Sometimes things can actually be quite attractive, even if when it's still just green lawn and some beautiful trees, thinned rather dreadfully to let enough sunlight in. And yet alternatives are possible. This street is a street I walk along almost every day. It can be quite hot in the blazing sun, although the pedestrian path is clean and comfortable to walk on. The orange trees once planted along the tarmac are mostly dead. I often wonder what this would look like if we added some indigenous trees like cork oaks, and some Mediterranean aromatic plants, a few rocks to create niches for insects and reptiles, and some succulent plants. And I think it's pretty easy to guess which version I prefer. Instead, we are improving the city environment by more and more grass, and not just in Rabat. To be honest, when I went back to try and identify which cities I was talking about with these images, I had trouble in deciding which was which. They all have green grass. They all have palm trees, probably Washingtonias, or Italian poplars, which guzzle a lot of water, and the same kind of decorative lighting. Everything is same, and yet there are 4 cities, but with one identity. And all this in the context of an arid to semi-arid climate zone. Some of the northern and coastal areas of Morocco, which you can see on the right-hand slide here, have a little bit of green on them. But you can see how fragile the area is by its proximity to the Sahara Desert. Records for the hottest ever temperatures were broken twice in 2023, in June and in August respectively, where the temperature got to over 50 degrees. And these are official temperatures, not just somebody frying an egg on top of their car bonnet. In this context, I've been reflecting a lot about what to do about all the green lawns going on in Moroccan cities, including Marrakesh for the recent IMF meetings in October last year. Marrakesh is at the door of the desert. It seems to me that the only way to change this is to change the way people perceive beauty. Why see unsustainable green lawns as beautiful? I've long been convinced that we need to change the paradigm of what beauty is. Why would a Moroccan with such a rich heritage of garden design in the form of its Andalusian gardens be so attracted to green grass that is essentially an English landscape tradition? Perhaps we can blame some of it on the French protectorate, which brought different values and a different cultural outlook. On the other hand, the protectorate saved the city from over-densification and made it the airy green city that it is today. So, what is beautiful? Joan Pim, who's one of the first landscape architects in South Africa, is the founder of the South African Institute of Landscape Architects. She tackled this subject in the early 1970s in her book, which was entitled Beauty is Necessary, Creation or Conservation of the Landscape. Now, it seems a little bit strange to introduce a book to you that I have never actually read. I once ordered it on Amazon, but it never arrived. I therefore had to ask ChatGPT what it was all about. And I suspect that the answers are strongly influenced by more recent trends in landscape architecture, but it's not really an issue in the context that we are in today. Beauty extends beyond mere aesthetics to include harmony, balance, proportion in various aspects of life. It has a psychological impact affecting mental health and emotional well-being. It has long been shown that beautiful environments can reduce stress, increase happiness, and improve overall quality of life, much in the same way that contact with nature can do. Furthermore, urban planning and architecture that includes green spaces and attractive architecture can enhance urban living. Culture plays a role in that different societies value and express beauty differently. Preserving natural beauty and maintaining ecological balance both help to ensure a beautiful environment for future generations. Communicating the value of beauty can lead to more mindful and respectful interactions with the environment. And lastly, ethical and moral dimensions come to play when we realize the importance of a commitment to well-being of the society as a whole. Now, it's actually very unfair of me to home in on only 2 images of Joan Pim's work in the mining town of Welkom, but it seems to illustrate the results of a cultural and social context. Joan was of Irish descent, born in Johannesburg. She was highly influenced by Brenda Colvin, who was a founder of the British Institute of Landscape Architects, now the Landscape Institute. And she was also a co-founder of the firm Colvin Moggeridge. Some of you who have been around IFLA for a long time might recognize the name of Hal Moggeridge, who he's quite an expert in historical preservation. So while Joan Pim's work was pioneering and very important for the profession, these isolated photos from the mining town of Welkom show a penchant for green grass, flowers, and a few trees. Yet her discourse was for natural landscapes and ecological influences and a sensitivity towards local context. And I suspect, like me, in many cases in the work I do in Morocco, she had a client breathing down her neck, knowing exactly what they wanted out of a project. Maybe some green grass is justifiable in places where people can sit on it and socialize together. But that's often not the case because we're often not allowed to sit or walk on the grass. But anyway, either way, it's better than concrete, that's for sure. So what cultural basis is there to love this? In spite of its effect of increasing the urban heat island, consuming twice as much water as a shrub-based landscape, and decreasing biodiversity again compared to a shrub landscape. Looking at the question of cultural biases, I began to question what we mean by nature when we talk about the importance of nature in the city. Do we mean simply planting green living things which have an aesthetic appeal by enhancing visual beauty? That plants that give psychological benefits in reducing stress, improving mood and overall well-being, or that any form of plants can improve air quality by filtering pollutants and creating oxygen. Plants can also help to create a microclimate that reduce the effects of the urban heat island and create localized cooler spots in the city. Or does the nature that we talk about mean that we have to recreate and preserve or restore complete ecosystems? This would ensure biodiversity, which we all know has positive effects that contribute to mitigating the effects of climate change. Ecological balance is restored, meaning that ecosystems function on their own, improving resilience in the face of unusual climate events. Ecosystem services make nature functional, and cultural and educational values reinforce and foster a connection to the environment. My unexpected week in Paris, from where I'm talking to you tonight, has reminded me of the great strides that the city of Paris has made to be sustainable through its comprehensive network of bike lanes and also its treatment of street planting. We still see the formal boulevards and clipped hedges that characterize French landscape architecture, but these in their right context and in the right place. Apart from the ban of all pesticides in the maintenance of public areas, many verges along the street trees and below trees have been converted into continuous bands and left to regenerate and grow without additional planting or maintenance. Can we learn to love this in Morocco? Personally, I actually take great pleasure in it. Admittedly, Paris's climate is not robust, but I feel sure that we have a lot to learn from this attitude. On Boulevard Pasteur, just down the road from where I am now, in the 15th arrondissement, the central verge is left for the sheep which come and graze periodically. So now taking a shift to arid environments, natural beauty in arid environments can be very striking. In the Kasbah Ayat Ben Haddou, with the granary on top of the hill, out of danger of flooding, and with difficult access to protect it from marauders. We see the planting of fruit trees, mainly olive trees, and cereals at the edge of the river valley. The oases of the desert along the watercourses are very striking, and far from the image one has of an oasis as a pool of water in sand with a clump of palm trees and a beautiful sky. In oasis towns, the local population are experts in permaculture, having practiced it for centuries before the term was ever invented. Irrigation through channeling the water from the river or from a well into the fields on a roster system ensures the sharing of resources equally between all members of the community. Indeed, there's a special representative of each community who manages the water. While irrigation by flooding is not really all that economical, crops are grown according to the seasonable availability of water, and so that there's rarely overuse. And on an aside, the Le Plan Vert of Morocco, which was initiated to guide the development of agriculture, has actually led to overconsumption of water because there were incredible subsidies given to install drip irrigation systems. And this has led to opening of more and more areas for agriculture, and mainly for big farmers who now exploit more and more land, using more and more water, and for more water-greedy crops like avocados and watermelons and melons. and also tomatoes. The desertic dune landscapes further south, in places like Mazuga, are striking in a different way. Apart from a few grasses, no green thing is to be seen anywhere. Yet people come here to resource themselves and to drink up the vastness of the horizon through meditation or stargazing at night. And this is also nature. So this has brought me to consider whether we have to always include plants and green living things into arid environments, and also to question whether it is ethical to do so. This project called Noah Solar Energy Complex is one that I worked on with 2 other firms about 10 years ago. It's a 3,000 hectare site on which 4 installations for producing solar energy have been included. And it was quite amazing that the client actually asked for the site to be landscaped, given that there was little water available, and it is a huge industrial site pretty much in the middle of nowhere. The project was based on the observation of the desert landscape and the way in which ribbons of green and yellow flowers showed up just after the rain in the slightest depression in the topography of the site. It was amazing to see how the desert suddenly came to life. So our project used swales to capture natural rainwater that we were able to and in such a way that we were able to actually cancel several kilometers of stormwater pipes that had been planned by the engineer and use the water locally on site instead. And so here we can see, after an episode of rain, how the swale worked to allow water to gather beneath the plants, where it was needed. We also used zeolite and some complementary drip irrigation, but we wanted the planting along the access road to blend into the arid environment, so additional water was limited. Indigenous species were not available in sufficient numbers, so we had to use so-called exotic species, but which were still desert-tolerant plants that had been acclimatized to the area over probably 60 or 70 years. So it's a bit like the question, where do camels come from? But they're not actually indigenous plants. So in addition to these techniques of irrigation, we also told the story of the power of the sun, starting with a giant rock that you see on the left, which was cracked into 2 by the sun. And many of these little smaller pebbles, obviously at a smaller size, were actually found on the site. So it's like a true phenomenon that the heat of the sun actually and the cooling at night actually caused them to crack. And the Gabion sculptures represent the harnessing of the forces of nature, of these naturally hewn stones. And so the Gabions represent how the forces of nature were harnessed. And this line of Gabions ends with a group of Gabions equipped with solar bricks arranged to represent a city. Planting in bowls in the middle of the desert also enabled us to sustain life. Once we were able to protect the little plants by these locally woven baskets from hares that came to nibble at the young plants. So the photo on the left is taken about 6 years after planting. Similarly, sources underneath these agave plants also allowed natural rainwater to accumulate underneath the plants. The rainy episodes are very rare and infrequent, but enough to sustain life for these succulent plants. And this makes quite a dramatic view when seen from above, which was part of the brief that for some reason the client wanted some of these landscaping features to be seen from above. And I only just noticed when I was gathering this photo together that there's actually a smiley here, which was quite coincidental. Inspired by nearby oases, in some parts of the site that separated one solar station from the next, we simply tilled the soil along the contour lines to slow down the water. And we wanted to use mules to do this in the traditional way, employing local labor and fresh manure and adding fresh manure to the soil. But it was simply too hard, so we had to use tractors. But you can see in the right-hand picture how some natural grasses have begun to grow. And the stone cairns that we created from rocks that were picked up from the site remind us of local fields where farmers gather up the stones so that they can plant their crops. So cultural expressions on other areas of the site were made using earth architecture to represent natural biomes in Morocco at points corresponding to a giant map of the country traced on the ground. And more intensive planting has been placed near the buildings which welcome visitors. Our client in this case has to be given a lot of credit because they trusted us and allowed us to take an unusual direction compared to what the green lawns and things that I showed you before. Clients often tend to have ideas of how they want things to look, so it was really refreshing to have a client. On another part of the site, the contractor charged with leveling the site dumped the cut temporarily, and it became clear that moving 700,000 cubic meters of earth was going to cause a environmental disturbance. And so it was decided to keep these stockpiles in place. So they were compacted and then carved and sculpted into ziggurat-like forms. Okay, so they're quite simple forms which recreate the flat mesas and buttes in the area. And so with a stairway to heaven, as I like to call it, you get quite a spiritual feeling going to the top of these stockpiles and getting a 360-degree view, not only of the solar producing plant, but also of the valleys in the surrounding valleys. Calling to mind nature in the power block of one of the plants was done through planting a field of sunflowers using recycled telephone poles, wooden telephone poles, cut at a slant and painted yellow. We couldn't add any plants here because adding water would have attracted snakes, venomous snakes, and scorpions. And this is an area where there's a concentration of human activity. Okay, just quickly, because I think we're running out of time. But on another project in an industrial estate, I don't only work on industrial estates, but this is a recent project which I'm just in the process of delivering. It was redesigned twice because the client announced that there would be no water made available for irrigation at all, and so they wanted basically a plant-free landscape. It was quite a shocking realization to have this come from a client. And made me realize the seriousness of the water situation in Morocco. And this has actually happened twice recently. I now regret that I only planted some agaves and a narrow band of ornamental grasses. And I would like to, if I could go back again, I would like to have included some trees, even if they had to be watered by a truck-loaded cistern for a couple of years before they could take. But maybe that could still happen at a later stage. I created raised platforms alternating with sunken areas of natural sandy soil. The addition of a layer of compost, which you can just see on the bottom left-hand picture, oops, sorry, over here, is meant to obviously keep more moisture in the soil, but also in the hopes that there will be some spontaneous vegetation that arises once the rains come. And the challenge will then be the maintenance of the natural vegetation, how it can be nurtured and guided to look good and not just one big mess of weeds, as people like to call them. I figured that if spontaneous vegetation can be encouraged through changes in topography and by creating obstacles to the flow of water, which also offer shade, like the low stone walls here, then this similar phenomenon would be possible in a milder climate in which the second project is located. And so some natural spontaneous vegetation in Rabat would hopefully appear when the next rains come in the winter. Okay, so where does this bring us all? The three traditional circles that we see representing sustainable development with environmental, social, and economic components have always struck me that the sustainability bit in the middle is so tiny. And if we take the 3P model of people, planet, and profit, the profit part seems way too important. And so when I came across the Living Building Challenge, which represents 7 petals, including beauty, water, materials, place. So that would be looking at context in an arid area with plants, without plants, energy, not only the consumption of energy, but the production of energy, equity, which is obviously a very important issue when we start talking about natural resources such as land and water, and aspects such as health and happiness, which is one of our most common and important trends in landscape architecture today. Then we get not only a sustainable environment, but also one that can be regenerative as well. So I think maybe finding the balance somewhere with these 7 elements is something that we should be focusing on. So the answer is, I guess, just do your best, even if you make mistakes. You can only try. And thanks for listening to my little rant.
Thank you, Carey, for that very inspiring lecture where the intersection of tradition and contemporary issues are very interesting to address some of the challenges we have in our profession. So it was very inspiring to see your work. Well, this is the moment where we open up for questions from our participants. So once again, at the bottom, you will have a Q&A little icon that you can type your questions. I'm not entirely sure if you can directly ask questions. Maybe the event team can clarify that. But while you get acquainted with all the technology and how to write your question, I'm probably going to start warming up with a question for Carey. So lots of, as I said earlier, Carey, like what was very inspiring is that real intersection of tradition, culture, and the contemporary thinking around designing with the more extreme conditions that you experience in Morocco. So here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we have, of course, a different setting, but one of the important issues here is really our rich Maori or indigenous heritage and also our unique flora that we have in New Zealand. Could you expand a little more on how you bring together that traditional knowledge and practices, as you highlighted in some of your projects, and how those have been integrated in the contemporary thinking of designing our beautiful landscapes? And how do you see that as we move forward in a profession in terms of sustainability and cultural relevance?
Okay, I think looking at what is commonly called ancestral wisdom is really, really important. If we look at the Moorish architecture in Morocco, for example, using long, thin runnels of water that not only take water to irrigation water to where it's needed, but that also allow water to evaporate and cool the air, allowing for human comfort. But where the surface isn't so big that you're not losing way too much water. I think being open to observing how these architectural elements worked, or the use of enclosed courtyards to keep out the worst of the heat, give shade, keep out unpleasant winds and dust-laden winds, especially in places further south like Marrakesh. The advantages of using earthen architecture, which are basically self-insulating buildings.
Mm.
On the other hand, I have to say that the recent earthquake that we had in September last year, earthen architecture led to a pretty catastrophic situation where people were actually buried alive, because the earth there were no, if a concrete building falls, the chances are that you might find a little pocket of air or something, underneath a fallen slab, and possibly if the falling concrete didn't kill you, you might be able to have enough air to breathe. But with earthen structures, people basically literally were buried alive, suffocated underneath the dust. But I mean, that's a really exceptional circumstance. So I guess observing these traditional ways of doing things, being open to asking questions, and maybe even getting some of the indigenous population on your team is a way to be to take some of this traditional knowledge and try and use it in a use it in a modern way. But I also think that it's quite interesting to notice that there are trends in the world. Okay, they're not major trends if you take count numbers of people, but of people trying to return and live off the grid and go back to a way of life where they are living off the land and growing what they eat. And I mean, it's obviously naive, we can't all do that, but it's interesting, I think, the way in which some of our modern life has just got too much for people. And so going back to the roots and the basics is really, really important. Unfortunately, I know nothing about Maori culture, or so I can't really take examples from New Zealand. But for example, things like Moroccan zilij, which are the handcrafted ceramic tile. So a ceramic tile of about 20 centimeters is baked in an oven with a specific color. And then malams all sit down in a row with an anvil and a kind of hammer, and they shape them into a 10-pointed star, an 8-pointed star, a 6-pointed star, a 5-pointed star, I don't know, a lozon shape, whatever. And then they all get put together in these intricate designs. Things like that, using traditional craftsmanship, but instead of using all the traditional shapes, putting things together in different ways is also quite a way to be inspired. I've just designed a couple of fountains which were inspired by my school shirt, my school blouse. I went to a very posh private school in Johannesburg, and we wore white blouses with hand-stitched borders along the sleeves and the neckline. So the blouses were white and the stitching was in dark blue and dark green. So I have made little zilij designs along a fountain that was inspired by my school shirt. So which that's like bringing South Africa to Morocco, but using traditional materials. So I guess sometimes thinking a little bit out of the box is can be quite challenging, and can allow one to bring together some of these traditional elements together. I don't know whether I really answered your question or not.
Oh, no, you did brilliantly well. We have two questions in our chat. So one is from Andrea Davis, asking how much are the water charges in Rabat, and who is selling the water?
Okay, that's a really good question. Because if you ask somebody, if you take this question up with some of the authorities, they'll say, oh, but it's all recycled water. Well, yes, some of it is recycled water. It's grey water that has been recycled. And yes, so some of it that is so. It doesn't mean it's cheap, though. It's not that much cheaper than using potable water, but at least it's more available. It's less drastic than using potable water. But the amount of water you need to clean the filters that get all clogged up very quickly by sending reused, recycled water into an irrigation system is a phenomenal amount, which is actually enough to water the whole city once again. So in fact, so yes, it's recycled water, but it's highly mixed with potable water as well. So it's kind of like a bit of a fudgy question. But the water is supplied by the utility company, but the communes or the municipalities have to pay the bill. And sometimes the municipality is given an order from the next layer up that they have to plant grass and they have to water it, and which has led to a lot of situations where some of the local authorities are actually in huge debt towards the utility company because they just can't pay the bills. But they can't stop either, because otherwise they'll get into big trouble.
Wow, that's extreme.
Yep.
We have another question from someone anonymous. Thank you, Carey. I'm interested in what ended up happening with the beautiful garden in Rabat, with the paths that were not at right angles. I hope they took your advice and retained it.
Okay, well, that garden, it was actually closed for quite some time. It's just reopened. I haven't actually looked at it from above again, but I did ask somebody, and they said, "Oh yes, they did correct the bad alignment." But they did it. I have to say, they did it really well. They used the pebbles that were on the original area, and so again, it's another what do you say in English? Another a malfaçon that I didn't pick up again. So I think it was done, but it was done quite well. Yeah, but it's no longer a historic monument, then, is it?
Oh no, yeah, outrageous. Well, looking at your experience in coming from South Africa and then being in Morocco, probably working in a little more extreme conditions, particularly arid conditions. And now, looking at the way the world is changing with all the pressures on climate change and biodiversity, what can landscape architects like yourself in the more arid regions contribute to the global discourse and advancement of the profession globally?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about the global discourse. Yes, I mean, we should be contributing to the global discourse, but I also well, I think we shouldn't be afraid to ask questions, and we shouldn't be afraid to admit that maybe we don't know. And this is where IFLA is really valuable to me. I mean, Bruno can probably tell you the number of times I've sent out a call to IFLA members to say, please give me information about planting grass in cities, and what does it do to the environment. And you get a whole bunch of articles and stuff, and I have to admit I haven't even read all those, because they're just too many. Like, information comes flooding in. But I mean, there's enough to write a PhD dissertation, I think, on the subject. But so I think that we have to keep talking. We have to keep talking. We have to keep answering questions. We have to keep communicating on the subject. The thing is, doing it within Morocco, for example, is really, really sensitive. I mean, I can't go around posting things on LinkedIn saying this grass business is totally ridiculous, because I will be well, I don't work. There's no public work for landscape architects left in Morocco, because the landscape, there is the boss is a landscape architect, or the boss of each region thinks he's a landscape architect, and he plants trees, and poplar trees, no less, Italian poplars, grass, Washingtonia palms less so, because there's been a recent campaign to outlaw those, because they're foreign and they don't give any shade back. But so yeah, no, it is. It's a really tough question. And even, I mean, once recently I gave I worked on a major roadway in Agadir, which is in also the southern part of the country. and I got applause for my presentation because I pointed out the sustainable development goals, which goals we were like working towards with this project, and how the plant selection was really good, using mulch and on the surface of the soil, and no fountains because we'd lose lots of water through evaporation, and no green grass, and everybody applauded and said, fantastic, it's really well thought out, it's brilliant. And then, but we'd like you to just go back and change your project slightly. We'd like a huge fountain on the round point, and we want at least, like 3 meters of grass along the road edge. I mean, where have you been? Like, why? It can just be so frustrating.
Yeah. Do you think that that's the way of people thinking? Or if we have all those elements, it's the stamp of we are part of the developed world, and that's what contemporary design looks like.
Yes, I mean, I think there is a lot of that, and there is also a slightly kind of, I don't want to say a cultural issue, but like people like their homes to be like clean and neat, and with flowers, like flower pots, maybe geraniums and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
which is on the walls and things like that, which is fine. But and I have to say, Rabat is a beautiful, clean city. It's spotlessly clean. I mean, you can't find a stray leaf because they'll rake it up the minute it falls off the tree. And but it's just too clean. It's just too, I mean, as I said, I go off walking to work, and I go looking for things to like say, oh, there's something popping out of the grass, or there's a bee, or there's like some ants or something. Because it is just, yeah. So I mean, that's why I'm wondering, is it really a cultural thing to like all this green grass? Maybe it's just because it's better than we had before, which was just naked earth, which was hot and dusty. So now having this green grass is fantastic. But I mean, it uses double the water than an ordinary shrubby landscape, or with woody ground covers or whatever would use, whether or not they're indigenous plants, even if they're not indigenous plants, because that's another problem that we have, is that indigenous plants are not available on the market to go and buy in a nursery. So if you have a big project, either it has to be a really long-term project so that you have time to go and collect the seeds, find somebody to do it, grow them, and then plant them up, which we did a little bit of that in the solar complex project. We had a little bit of time, and we did grow some local, like not the trees, but the local, the ground cover plants were grown specially for the project. And in fact, that project is quite interesting. It has its own nursery, which was built on the site with a view to bringing researchers and bringing the local community as well, that they would be able to come and get seeds to regrow there, or to what do you call it, replant the pastures for their sheep and their livestock and things like that. I'm not sure how far that part of the project actually got, but there was a lot of local development involved as well, which is really like a hats off thing from the client's point of view.
Well, I think we are getting towards the end, and I think my final question for you would be, what will be your piece of advice or wise words that you could left for our landscape architects in New Zealand, particularly the younger generation?
The younger generation. Be inspired, be passionate, never give up, try again, and don't be scared about to make mistakes. I mean, you might not get it right the first time, but that's okay, as long as you're trying. And nature is actually very forgiving, and our profession is actually very forgiving, because it's not as if we like building a house that if it cracks or whatever, it's going to fall down and like injure people. Okay, there might be some isolated cases where we might have an incident in a landscape space, but in general, we're not casting acres and acres and acres of concrete We're using plants, and some plants might grow, some plants might not grow as well. Some might have been perfectly adapted, and others might have trouble, taking off, whatever. So, but the experimentation is important, and the feedback from those mistakes is like really, really important. And then I think I also have to say, get involved with the New Zealand Institute of Landscape Architects, get involved with IFLA further afield, because it's really, really enriching. And then go and win the President's Award, because then you'll never get yourself off the hook. Last year I was ready to step back from a lot of things and slow down my activity, but then Bruno honored me in that way, so I couldn't step back. So here I am with you tonight. Yeah.
You are a very important a person within IFLA and what we do. So thank you for your contribution over the years, and it has been phenomenal to work alongside you. On that note, I would like to thank Carey for her presentation today. It was wonderful, to navigate through your inspiring work and see the amazing stuff you are doing in Morocco. So this means that our webinar is coming to an end. A recording of this conversation will be uploaded to the NZILA YouTube channel in these coming days. And also like to remind you that the next Streetscape webinar is scheduled for July 25th, when you will hear from Billy Fleming, who will be joining us from Pennsylvania. Registration details for the webinar are available at the NZILA events page. So thank you again. Thank you, Carey, for joining us from Paris in your holiday and staying up until late. And Matewa, see you guys next time.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Bruno, and thanks everybody.
Thank you, Carey.